Hi, I'm Alex.
And I'm Amy.
Our project is called Mind, Body, and Soul, the Nature of Well-Being, and this podcast is just one small piece of the overall project. We are making a documentary that follows our hike on the Continental Divide Trail that will explore how spending time in nature affects a person's mental, physical, and spiritual well-being.
We are guinea pigs in a sense because we will be documenting our own experiences and recording changes that we find. Along the way, we are interviewing people about their experiences in nature to see how they have been affected.
Much of the benefits that come from being in nature are subjective, and therefore hard to measure in a quantifiable way. That's why we have turned to recording stories as a way to distribute this knowledge. Since the beginning of human culture, we have compressed valuable information into stories, and that's how we have shared wisdom throughout the generations.
We hope that the stories we gathered during this project will help spread some of the wisdom that can be found in the wilderness. Episode 16, an interview with Joe Saenz, a member of the Apache Tribe, sharing his compelling insights on the profound impact of nature. With his experience as an outfitter in the Gila Forest, Joe emphasizes the immense power of our natural surroundings, including the waters and trees. He firmly believes that building a strong relationship with nature can bring numerous benefits to our lives.
Shai Mbatsu Nabetin Shima Wishol Shita Tsihe Ndebena. My name's Joe Saenz, and welcome to Apache country. Specifically, this is Chiricahua and Warm Springs territory, traditional territory. And that's, traditionally we greeted and welcomed people that traveled through. So, sort of following an old tradition here. Yeah.
So let's start with what you do for a living.
My time is kind of split in two right now. Besides what I do at home with family life and my business, I'm owner-operator of Wolfhorse Outfitters. It's a guide and outfitting service, but I specialize in recreational and educational outfitting. I don't do the trophy hunting. The other time is split with the work that we are doing to reestablish the Chiricahua Apache Nation here locally. And so we've been working for the last 15, 20 years to reestablish this tribal entity here locally as a headquarters, and then to encourage and hopefully bring in more descendants back to this area.
Can you tell me a little bit about the history of the tribe here and what you're trying to reestablish?
What I initially would refer to a collective consciousness used to come to me just as a description of, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? In the last couple of years, I've sort of understood why. For example, there's 4 main groups of Apaches that have come in here without any real prompting, any kind of advertising. Everybody's just kind of showed up on their own. Even Fort Sill, that are the descendants of the prisoners, have now showed up on I-10, trying to reestablish themselves. But there's a couple other groups. There's one in TRC, and there's one that came back from California. Apparently some of the Indians that were swept up into the Relocation Act ended up in big cities around the country. And so a lot of those people are starting to return here. And our organization's kind of the same thing, but what we here found just recently is that there is actually quite a contingency of Apaches in Mexico that are now petitioning the Mexican government to be recognized. And so it's been kind of interesting to hear all these stories come together without any wide advertising. to some extent, as we call moccasin telegraph. Somehow that word just gets out, and we specialized in that mode of media, I guess, and we were able to get information out pretty quick. But that's what's happened here now, and because of our locality for this particular group, we've been working to not just come back to the area, but to actually set up a physical location. Because as we look around this area, our culture is misrepresented and underrepresented. And so if you look around, there is really no place outside of what I hear that they've done something at the members' heritage site, that they have some kind of Apache display. But there is no Apache museum in this area. You can find one at Fort Bowie. You can find the Culture Center at Mescalero. But outside of those two areas, I don't think there's any other major community that has an Apache museum. And so that's what we're going to do here. And getting this physical location, which is contrary to our history, but because of the way the modern world is, we have to adapt to it. And so we are getting a physical building, and we're going to turn that building into an administrative site, an education site, a cultural site. And along with that, we've been sort of fortunate that they've also offered a space for us to develop a gathering, ceremonial grounds. So we hope to move our powwow out to there too. This powwow that got canceled this past year that we were going to hold in Fort Bayard anyway, we're going to have hopefully a permanent location, because that's what we've been working on. We're tired of moving around, I guess, to a certain extent, even though that's what we used to do, just constantly moving around. But now, because of mail and phone, got to be in one location. So we're adapting to it, but it's not a new story. We have a total of 8 reservations that we negotiated for in this area throughout our country, which is pretty large. But we were not able to keep any of them. We were always tricked out of them, or not. No, they didn't follow through with their promises, or these treaties were not ratified, or these offers were not adopted and confirmed by Congress. So we lost all 8 reservations. We lost them all. We know where they are, but so we tried. We've been trying for a long time, and here we go again. We're going to try to find a spot so we can settle and do what we do. So,
do you think there's something special about this time? Like, why is everybody kind of coming together right now to try and do this?
Well, we see it as it seems to be this kind of energy that's circulating with everybody trying to do what they're doing. But there's always something to speak about timing, I guess. As you're sort of alluding to. Within the last maybe 4 or 5 years, things have just happened that kind of made it clear that basically we may be doing the right thing and not running into so much trouble. 15, 20 years ago, we were always hitting walls all the time. Even things we accomplished, it took us a year to 2 years pushing and fighting to get them accomplished. But in the last 4 or 5 years, things seem to kind of be falling into place. Things are happening. And so we're hoping that energy and that direction just kind of builds momentum.
Why do you think that is? Or is the rest of the population kind of ready for this?
Well, I don't know. One of the things that I've often mentioned was, things are going to change. Kind of get ready for them. And that we've been trying to say that for quite a few years, but it seems like here recently it's just taken up that more momentum. I got asked a question one time, what do you think of Sedona? Because there's a real public knowledge and understanding that Sedona, there's a vortex there. People claim there's a vortex. And people have asked me, how does that compare with the Gila? Because we have a history here, some real powerful people having that knowledge and contact with spirits and the Creator. And my response is usually there was an even stronger vortex here, if you want to call it a vortex. That connection was even much stronger here because of that history that we have with these people receiving those powers that, as far as I know, are very rare in a lot of places. Some Indian communities and other tribal areas have very powerful people, but not to the extent like we had, And I think that was just the connection with the earth. That was the connection with the land, with the spirits, understanding how to communicate with them, understanding that they were a being, a spirit. Fortunately for me, I grew up in that way where our family would talk about things like that. My grandfather would talk about trees like they were people. Mom would talk about talks about water like a spirit. So there's there's a lot of things that we're grateful for that were passed on to us, because it allows us to see everything in a different way. That's why we want to come back to share that and be able to say, hey, there's a better way to do things here. It's going to take a lot of changing, a lot of direction of how you look at things, but it is possible to live that way again. So, for whatever reason, there's a few of us that have been doing a lot of the pushing. As long as we're healthy and we can stand and keep moving, I think we'll be continuing this push. It's not always popular, but it's something we feel obligated, responsible to do because of this timing. That if we weren't doing it, who would? So, but for some of these things, it's taken us 15, 20 years to just set up to be kind of poised, like go. And right now is the time to go. That ceremonial ground is going to be pretty important for us. We'll get to do quite a bit there that we're not going to get pushed around. That's kind of why the powwow stopped. There's a lot of pushing around. We don't want you here. Go over there. Why'd you come back? Why are you here again? We've already told you once we don't want you here. So we're going to show you by doing this and doing that to discourage you. And it kind of worked again, but not totally. We decided to step away from Silver City and go somewhere else. But Silver City's always had that history. There's a lot of good people in Silver City, but the power, the people that make decisions, the high decisions, still have that hesitation to take us seriously. The stuff you guys are doing and involved with, that should be a priority here. There's a lot of stuff here that should be looked at differently. There should be trails for us to go to Silver City from here. We've asked, you should have a livery stable in Silver City so we can ride our horses over there and have a safe place to put them. You guys claim to be a Western town. You grew up with cattle and all these ranchers that you promote, all those brands that you see on those signs coming into Silver City, Copper Bells and all this. There's a disconnect there. And we've often asked them, come on, make a trail. Arenas Valley Road used to be the trail. And so there is a corridor that, should be developed that allows that type of physical contact to change that mentality that we're trying to promote. you know, even how you use the English language when you describe things, you know, to describe it properly, that you use your language correctly, you know. So it's always this interest. Let's, you know, let's push them, find the right time. Even just this simple turnoff right now with coming off of 180 onto Arenas Valley Road, that's been a fight with the state that so very few people know about, that we're dealing with. And so it's like coming back here and we're still fighting as an organization. We're still promoting, we're still advocating. Since we've come back and organized, there's probably 4 major fights that we've had, all the way from the Black Range to the Mogollons. Beryllium mines, jet flyovers, the damming of the Gila River, all these interests that are still looking at our country and New Mexico as again, we need to change that word resource, you know, changing the dialogue of these words and how they impact what you're describing. So we need to change all this reference to whatever we have around here through the copper industry, through the national forest, that we change those terms that, no, they're not resources, you know, they're not extractable, and trying to promote that. With the jets, it was like silence. You can't put a value on silence, you know, and that's what the jets were going to do, was totally disrupt that. And you know, there's a lot of good places, but there are very few places that you can hear yourself breathe, you know. So that fight was, violence was threatened, you know, that's how serious it was, you know. I had an idea that if they didn't stop, I was going to take my horses to the entrance of Holloman and load them up like a pack string, and ride right up to the gate, just like the vehicles were, and tell them I'm coming in to do a pack trip on your runways. I don't know, maybe I'd get arrested or something, but you know, it was getting that desperate. You know, for me, it was going to ruin my business. You know, so what happens to this country, aesthetically, naturally, through your senses, it'll directly affect me. So, got to keep monitoring what they're doing, because they're not going to stop. You know, we've seen this for now 400 years. It's just this constant pecking. We want it. We're going to take it. You know, that's what we see in when we discuss mascots. You know, pecking at us, taking our names. You know, same thing with this environment. You're taking little things. Well, it's amazing. They're going to take silence. You know, it's like, wow, they could do that, or threaten to do that. You know. So creating this system of traveling, people traveling, it worked for us. You know, one of the things I always found funny is you know, for the longest time our history was movement. Because we didn't settle in villages, we had mobility as a survival technique, because we moved to harvest plants. But the American concept of nationalism could not adapt itself to that type of movement, so they had to set us on reservations. And the funny thing to us was that as soon as they set us down in reservations and communities, what did America do? They discovered the RV. Now all America's traveling. They're going all over the country. They're seasonal. They're all this stuff, and it's like, well, you know, if we were doing it, it was bad. If somebody else was doing it, it was okay. You know. So I try to a lot of times just kind of change that perspective of, well, you know, you're coming back to something that we've been saying for a long time. You know, this is good for you. This is good for us. This is good for the world. This is what we should be doing. You know? So, you know, and the work that I do, you know, I support that industry. I support that effort. to get people out, moving, walking, seeing the country. It's a lot of nice country out here.
Seems to me like a lot of this is coming down to just kind of a fundamental difference in perspective. So you talked about seeing the trees as people and seeing spirits in water, and the other perspective is that it's all a commodity to be used as a resource. So why is it so important to kind of have these relationships with nature and to see the trees as people?
Because in reality we are equals, you know. Our stories tell us that at one time the trees, the rocks, the animals, birds, we all could talk, communicate together. And that's how the world was arranged in balance. You know, was that communication, that collaboration. And so we have to think of these animals and these things as equals, and treat them that way, you know, whichever way we can and whatever our situation is, you know, we have to adapt to it. It's interesting to hear some of these reports regarding what's your place on Earth? What are you doing here? And yesterday, I heard a reporter, he said, you're going to have to fundamentally change everything you do if you're really serious about changing all this, you know. And it's like, well, as Indians, what do? We were made to change one way, now we got to think about changing back. Well, we have a history of that ability to change, so hopefully it's going to be easy for us, you know. Because through our history of the time that we've inhabited in this world here, we know we didn't come from somewhere else. We have proof. We challenge archaeologists, anthropologists to prove us wrong in our creation story, because our creation story is not just a myth. It's not a fancy story. Everything in our creation story directly relates to the physical world. In the beginning, we have monsters that killed us. When we emerged in this country, people say, well, how can you say, well, we don't believe Africa was the only emergence points. There was emergence points around the world. And there was one here on these continents. And in the beginning, for us to come out into this world, there were monsters that would kill us. So we had to hide all the time. And in this creation story, to talk about monsters and how they would eat you and kill you sounds, you know, like a myth, sounds like a legend, some kind of story that we accommodate. But we often have to remind people that in our emergence from this world, even your own scientists speak of that time, but they don't make that connection. You know, we often ask people, what happened in the Pleistocene? You guys call Pleistocene. What happened in the Jurassic? What happened in the, you know, some of these other periods, Mesozoic, and what were they? Well, they were huge animals. They were giant animals. And we had that here in the Pleistocene in North America, where there was giant beaver, giant elk, giant moose, giant bear, mastodon, you know, so that these animals existed. And we've always found that, well, they're in our stories for a reason. Because if it's not something that we actually saw, that connection was there enough that we understood that those stories passed down to us had a very real meaning to them. It wasn't just an entertainment, you know. A lot of times that's what some stories are relegated, but for most tribal use of stories, that was the education, that was the passing on knowledge. Yeah.
Does that creation story keep going?
More
to it?
To a certain extent, I think it does, even though it hasn't been talked tribally as what that outcome of that story is, because we really don't have, that I know of, or I've ever heard of, a story where it ends. Like the Mayas had the end of the calendar, things like that. I've never heard of an Apache story that says the world stops or the world ends. There were warnings that we had come really close to being wiped out, but there was a lot of intelligent people that did the right things, did the wrong things, but their end effort was to survive. My great-grandparents, their parents before them, my grandfather, what they did for us to be able to come back here is, that in itself is an amazing story. And it's not that old. It's not that, it's not ancient. It's pretty recent. So some of the trails that you guys will be following, they're trails that may have been used for a long, long time. So, and that's what we tell people is get your feet on the ground. Well, Indians rode horses. Well, the Apaches were different. We were half-time horse people because we wanted to be on the ground too. It was a matter of survival for us too, not to be dependent on the horses, to be dependent on our legs.
You talked about the vortex in the Gila River and how that gave some people powers. What would you say those powers are, and what's going on there for somebody who wouldn't know anything about this?
Well, power is very private, and so it's, we can always allude to say that yes, that power exists. That power more than likely is that person's connection to the earth and to the Creator. We have several entities that we recognize as spiritual. White painted woman, killer of enemies, child of the water. They were ones that showed Apaches how to survive on this land that the Creator gave us. And so their knowledge and their ability to connect with certain people gifted those people that ability to do something for the whole group. It was never private. It was never for your own gain. It was never for your own profit. It was to help somebody else. If it was about medicine, then you knew how to care for people. You knew how to dress wounds. You knew how to look at infirmities. If it was about plants or animals, you had that knowledge. I have friends that have told me that they have horsepower, and then because of that, he didn't compete in rodeos. That was his sacrifice of having this ability to deal with horses. Was he didn't abuse it by going and cheating and going into an industry where he could use that talent and profit. And so, that's how he explained it to me. So how he received it, that's extremely personal, that's extremely private. But we know of the stories of those powers. Geronimo, he was highly publicized, and he shared what his powers were. Lozen, we know because of that history. But we had people that had rattlesnake power, ammunition power, that they had the ability to sense everything around them and find those things. That was their specialty. Not one person did everything. Everybody in the group had a specialty.
Are these vortex areas, do you think they're naturally occurring in the landscape, or is it because something happened there?
Well, for us, it's because of how we believe that we received this land, and that that connection was, it was, I guess, vitally, crucially important that that connection always be maintained. And so the ability of medicine people, medicine men, holy people, those are the ones that were relied upon to maintain that communication, to maintain that connection. It wasn't necessarily like we went to a medicine man, like you go to a priest and see if you can talk to God, but it was the interpretation of these medicine people that took the information and their knowledge and what communication they did have with the Creator. Set certain objects, set certain directions, even receiving a song, receiving names, receiving things like that, that they were so acute to that connection that those small things were easy for them to accomplish. Yeah.
Do you believe everybody could have some sort of power?
For Apaches, it was believed that we all had the ability to receive power if we were open to it. I've heard elders describe it as a very scary situation because it's a huge responsibility, and it wasn't always accepted, because if the responsibility of it could be too much. And so you weren't always obligated to accept it. But for Apaches, it was tribally believed that we all had the ability to do it. Because of the way the culture was arranged in our connection to whether it was plants, animals, movement, weather, and how the routines went. We were all within that place to hear those things and see those things and receive those things. And so, it's hard to say, okay, well, we live by trial and error. No, it may have happened some, but a lot of our thoughts are that some of these holy people and medicine people actually received either messages or dreams where they would interpret them into medicines, songs, very specific things, knowledge, like they say Geronimo could see, at a distance. It's amazing. They had drones, spiritual drones. They had those back then. And so some of the stuff that we are either relearning or bringing back here because of this break when we got chased out of here. Some of the things we're either relearning or we're bringing them back remind us of all these little things that sometimes we have to rethink about them, and to sort of help us continue to try to set that perspective again. Like with the Gila Wilderness, we've asked the Forest Service to give it back to us. They didn't like that very much. We turn it into an Apache preserve. Stop trophy hunting, stop firefighting, and let the earth do what it does. Even if it's not for my generation, maybe for my sons or nephews and nieces, maybe they'll get to see it that way. But we all have a little bit of a responsibility. And that's to maintain that connection, that vortex, that, I don't know if it's really a vortex, but from very young age, there was always that knowledge and that direction that was put into you that every day you were supposed to pray, and, look for that ability to help everybody around you.
How do you guys maintain this connection with the land, with these special areas?
We do our best to keep that by visiting them again, establishing them, recognizing them. We were often told, well, you guys know, when we first started to work here 20 years ago, people would often say, well, you know that history, but we don't see it, because this area was very poor at promoting Apache history or culture. That's what it intended to do, was to wipe it out. And so we were sort of forced to put things here because we never had the interest to build things here. Okay. So we started to kind of take that a little bit seriously, to say, okay, well, if we have to think about it that way too, that if we didn't know, well, how would we want to know too? How could we see? So our first big project was the Geronimo Memorial, was to establish that structure there. And that was odd to us because, piling rocks was never a thing for us, outside of stacking a couple of rocks for breastworks in a fight, in battle. Then we learned that with bullets, you had to pile rocks on top of you or in front of you to stop them. But outside of that, we were not rock builders. And so it was extremely difficult, conceptually and culturally, to put up that memorial for Geronimo, because we had to pile rocks. We had to help pile rocks, and that was just such an odd thing. And then we did the kiosk, the Apache kiosk there at Doc Campbell's, or next to Doc Campbell's. And it's kind of a structure, rock again, structure, that was also kind of the same thing, but it allowed us to put, for general information, Apache culture and some visuals and images, words, which are the things that we have to infuse into this dominant culture here, is so people start seeing those words around. We were extremely saddened, and I was upset with those new rock walls they put at the entrance into Silver City. It says, "Bienvenidos, welcome, Silver City." And we've been pushing them, which is part of this whole relationship with Silver City that I alluded to earlier, that we've been pushing them. I went to the Forest Service. You drive into the Forest Service office, they have a sign there that says, "Bienvenidos, welcome." So I walked into the office and said, "Why don't you guys put an Apache greeting there?" Their response was, "Why?" And it's like, well, okay. So when this sign went up for Silver City, it was the same thing. It's like, wait a minute. Mayor Ladner should know better. He should have known what we're trying to do around here to include us, to say, okay, well, let's educate the local community with another language, with another greeting, with another perspective, with another group of people that are actually coming in here and making this a residence area. We really do have descendants that are coming back to live in this area, that are specifically moving here for that reason. Some that want to, but we had hoped that we would have been included that way, but we're just going to have to do it on our own in Fort Bayard. The rest of the community does out. If the rest of Silver City doesn't want to include us, well, that's all right, But we'll get the people from Silver City to come out here. So yeah, everything, even the Columbus Day issue, that became a kind of a little sticky issue with Silver City, because everybody's changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Day. We've been trying here for a couple of years. Last year we approached them again, and this time they said, "Oh no, we don't celebrate Columbus Day." So they just out and out lied to us, the city council. Yeah, they do. They celebrate it. They shut down for business, and then they work with the Knights of Columbus to put up all those flags all around town. And so there is a certain amount of celebration to it, but they deny it. So they claim a very good bubble of insulation. Their latest claim to not having to even consider changing it to Indigenous Day is that because they are territorial charter town, that allows them to deny any other interests that are predominant in the state. I mean, the state changed it, the state holiday. And so Silver City is claiming that they don't have to do anything because they're not part of the state. And it's like, oh, okay. So let's continue this, celebrating this guy, you know. But it's part of that work to change that dialogue, change that idea of, you know, who's, and not even that it's a competition, but it's that, you know, if you're really serious about taking care of this country and making sure it's around for a couple generations more at least, let's be serious about it. Let's really do that.
There's an interest or a will within the community to make room for this kind of stuff. People think about it.
Oh yeah, no, like I said, I mean, you know, as humanity goes, that's why we're here. You know, that's part of it, is that there's a lot of support. There's a lot of good people in Silver City, in the Grant County area. You know, there is that support, and it's part of that, like the timing that you mentioned, that the support is in the right places for us to make that move to go even a level higher of what we are proposing, you know. And I guess to a certain extent we can say that Silver City basically saw us as a little local carnival, local club of doing these little local things, but in reality we were international. You know, so Silver City basically has 3 events: rodeo, blues festival, and the bike race. And then they have a lot of smaller events, but the major national ones are those 3. And they typically happen between late April and early June, so a month and a half or so, and that was it. You know, then small stuff. So that was one of the reasons why we made our powwow in the wintertime, was because we took it on as a responsibility to put on an event in the middle of winter when weather is just not a guarantee. But we were willing to risk it all to show Silver City that we were serious about providing something that they needed, and that was a major event in the middle of winter. And unfortunately, it was never taken that way, and it was very clear to us that we had to consider, you know, a different venue, a different, you know, a permanent place to not have to move. I mean, the powwow got moved a couple of times, and every time we applied for it every year. The first year we went, they charged us $800 to use the intramural gym at the university. By the time we had to leave there, as I phrase it, we had to leave there, they wanted nearly $6,000 to rent that intramural gym. And you know, it became evident that the more they raised it, the more difficult it was. So we couldn't afford it. So it was obvious that we were sort of, same thing with the conference center. First year, we were good at that. We opened up several event centers in the area. You know, we were like the test. Maybe that was the problem. But the conference center, same thing. When it first opened up, they allowed us to do the first major event there, the powwow. They charged us $1,500. The next year, they wanted almost $7,000. So it was obvious they didn't want us back. So we said, okay. So it became so difficult to secure proper areas for a winter powwow that we just decided to stop. So the next powwow we plan is outdoors, September. We got a small window of really good weather. We're hoping, but with these weather changes, we don't know what's happening. But our hope is that fourth weekend in September is going to be ideal weather, temperature, and we're going to start again. Go bigger and go outside.
So what is like the importance of these powwows for somebody who's totally uninitiated to this stuff? What does it mean to you guys?
Well, to a certain extent, it's easy to say it's exposure to an event and a cultural practice of a actually vibrant, thriving event. Even for a native person, an Indian, if they're thinking about powwows, the easiest way to compare it would be for Gathering the Nations in Albuquerque. We can go to all kinds of powwows everywhere, small powwows, medium-sized powwows, even some larger powwows. But to go to Gathering, the number of drums and the number of dancers, it's almost like an exposure to us, And so that's sort of a comparison of for a person that never been to a powwow and goes to a powwow, what they're exposed to if they're of mind and soul to take it in. It's amazing. And for us, it's the same at Gathering, because that one is, the number of drums that come to there is, you don't see that too often. They get 35, 40 drums. And it's like you hear everybody all around the country, every type of song, every type of rhythm. And the dancers, they're just that amount of dancers. When you're looking at 3,000 dancers, it's like, holy, that's a lot of dancers. And the outfits, not one of them the same. They may have similar structural features to them, form features, design features, but not one of them is the same. They're all... So the creativity is a great showcase that is unique. I look over here and I go, okay, well, my truck is black and your truck is black, but if you look around, can you think of other colors? Can you think of other colors of vehicles? You've seen red vehicles, you've seen blue vehicles. Where do you think that started? If I can ask you a question, where did colored vehicles start?
For the copying the outfits?
It was a story that involved the Osage Indians. And the Osage Indians in Nebraska, I believe, are historically known to be the richest Indians in the world. The first oil strikes and the first time the oil industry took off was because of their system of land use. And so these Indians became extremely rich real fast, to where Indians had servants, mansions. Well, if you remember the images of Ford and all the old cars, they were always black. Until the Osage Indians started walking into Nebraska. Some of these, I can't remember the town, but they started walking into, I forget the name of the town in Nebraska, but they would walk in with their blankets on. And they started going up to the car dealers and going, can you get that car in this color? And that's where the colored vehicle started. So, the contributions of visual, aesthetic things go a lot deeper and further back than people really realize. And hopefully with time, some of those contributions will be, better recognized and appreciated. We've changed a lot of things. People don't understand that as Apaches, we influenced where I-10 is. We influenced where I-40 is. We influence where these towns are at. There's a reason why Phoenix, Albuquerque, El Paso, Tucson, there's a reason why they are where they are. And why Silver City is probably the only town that ever grew in our country. We influence those demographics. So yeah, we're hoping to share those things so people understand them, and like I said, appreciate them a little bit better. Saddles, the work I do, saddles. People think they're Western. People think cowboys invented them. No, the basic saddle design is Indian. It's if you look at all the old Indian pictures of saddles, they're all wooden tree with rawhide covering. Well, that's the original basis of Western saddles. They were taken from that design. They were later adopted, but if you look at old Indian saddles, you can see that basic design there, because this Western saddle didn't come from somewhere else. It came from this country, and it comes from the basic Indian design. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we have given to the world. So we hope to be able to do that again.
So why do you think it is, this might be obvious, but that the general population doesn't know these things?
We believe that it's just part of the education that's been promoted. As we all, as children, what stories we hear consistently and over is the stories that we carry. When I came back to this country, I had an adult actually try to convince me that this was traditionally Navajo country. And why was that? Well, because the university promoted Navajo culture. They recruit in Navajo communities. And unfortunately, we've tried to encourage them to recruit in Apache communities, but they're not either set up or there's no interest in doing that. But I'm sorry, I must have lost trend of what the question was.
I guess why are these stories and this knowledge not more mainstream?
Back to the education, it's about our effort to change that dialogue. If we take that step to set up an Apache cultural center, museum, displays, I think that starts that first step toward, okay, well, there's a whole different design, there's a whole different something that we don't often see. Everywhere you go around here, you see a lot of the Pueblo designs, the baskets, the pottery. You constantly hear of the cliff dwellings, and so it's a matter of what the community is immersed in, and that's why I say that even just a simple thing as an Apache greeting at the entrance into Silver City would go a long way. People start asking questions once they feel, well, what is that? As we tried to do with the Geronimo Memorial, as we tried to do with the Apache kiosk, as we've tried to do with the Mangus Colorados Memorial state roadside marker that Fort Baird helped us with. We hope to put up more signs here and there. So even though we struggle with the fact of setting more things on the earth, I think the information will go a lot further than the impact. So it's important for us to make sure that dialogue gets started.
So this is going to seem like another obvious question, but it's just kind of open-ended, I guess. So how does being in nature and your connection to nature kind of help with your overall well-being? Talk about physical, mental, or spiritual.
Well, the cultural perspective for a physical body is that it's from the Creator. So we believe that it's important to keep your body healthy, along with the fact that it's a cultural. I don't know the word for it. Edict, where the saying is common that your legs are your best friends. And so from a very early age, culturally and historically, children were encouraged and taught and trained to run and to be healthy, to eat the right food. I mean, the food that we had here, we didn't grow it. We didn't have to grow it. Nature provided it. I mean, you look in this country, almost everything that you eat is sweet. Piñons, prickly pear, agave, datil. It has that sweetness to it, so it's those natural sugars, that we had access to. And so the interest of maintaining a strong, healthy body, sharp mind, successful tactics and techniques were very important. And so that has always sort of carried into it. We hear these stories of, typically Indians didn't live very long because, you hear the Lakota saying, it's a good day to die, even though it's not real true like that. But it was that thing that, it was a good thing to die as a young, strong warrior. But for Apaches, it was never a good day to die. And it was better, as we developed that technique of guerrilla warfare, was to strike and run, not stand there and fight. And so the training that was the responsibility of an adult to train a younger person was taken very seriously. One of the techniques that we had to adapt to out here because of the environment was breathing through your nose. So one of the most common ones and famous ones was that young boys, young girls, because girls were also raised this way, there was a gulp of water put in their mouth, and they were made to run up the hill to the top and run back down and spit the water out. And if they didn't do that, they got punished. But that taught them to breathe through their nose, and in this country, that's vitally important. So one technique was for us to adapt to items that we could use to help us that way. Flower petals, smooth round rocks, anything that you could carry in your mouth to make you water was important. That's how some of these people cross these long distances, not with much water. And you're talking elders, you're talking little kids, but that's how they were trained. So it wasn't like, we have to do this, we better do it. It was, you were trained from very beginning to be able to do that, so when it was necessary, you were set and ready. And so we've tried to carry that same knowledge of stay healthy. And Apaches didn't die young. A lot of our elders were in their 80s, 90s. My great-grandma lived to be 104. My grandfather didn't take care of himself very well, but he lived to be 98. If he would have taken care of himself, he would have lived a lot longer. But he was hardcore. He was in the outdoors all the time. And he was part of a generation that it was amazing that they even survived. But it was a lot of that. There was just a lot of attention to the physical body, of maintaining a balance. It wasn't even just buff up and get strong. It was maintain a balance. You can walk from here to there, but you can also run from here 2 hours away and keep running. It was amazing what they could do. I've worked in films, and we recreate and we reenact warrior scenes, and it to me it's always been amazing how even for the day doing those scenes and being in those conditions, the toll it can take on you. And as working in those films, at the end of the day, we get to go take a shower and go get a meal, and those guys were 24/7. They did that all day long, every day, day in and day out, and the strength and the stamina these guys possessed, it's amazing. I don't know if it can even be recreated anymore. The foods, the routines, the stresses, the struggles, it produced some pretty powerful people.
Could you talk a little bit about what their lifestyle was like? What was a kind of an average day in the life of 1,000 years ago?
Well, it varied quite a bit, but it was intermittent with a lot of struggle and a lot of kickbacking. Sorry, still learning English. Kicking back. That there was a division of labor. But in peaceful times, A major enterprise in the group was always food gathering. That's why Apaches moved around so much. Camps were not held for very long. There was three main reasons why camps were moved. Sanitation was one. Death in the camp was another. If somebody died, the camp was moved immediately. And the end of harvesting. You know, they say around here for some of these groups, if they were going to harvest acorns, they would go down by the burros. Huge oaks down there, you know. And if they were going to do gather piñones, they would go up toward Georgetown and this side of the Pinos Altos, and you know, so that you know, that movement was very important. So a day could be preparing food. Apaches were known to prepare food on a consistent basis and store it. We had a system called food caches, and that's why toward the end it became very difficult for the cavalry to keep up with us, because we didn't have to stop to make things or get things. A lot of times we could go from one food cache to another and resupply. You know, there's stories in the books that you hear, oh, they were resupplied really fast, and all of a sudden they got horses and materials, you know, within days. And it was like, no, there was no Walmart to run to. We had food caches that had materials, ammunition, you know, food, meat, dry meat, piñon cakes, you know, flat agave, and you know, certain of these warriors and people, they knew where they were, and they knew how to direct the groups and how to regather those supplies pretty efficiently. You know, it's amazing to think how these people thought that. But one of the daily routines was survival in a way that the group knew how to move. Every day, it was the leader's responsibility to arrange for meeting places. So if the group was attacked or had to run for any reason, there was a prearranged place where everybody met 2 days later, 3 days later, that evening. That knowledge was consistently passed within the group. And so every day was a matter of industry or casual, but it was always a matter of be alert. You know, sentries were always put out. If sentries weren't, that's usually when we had trouble, if we didn't see things coming. And so, you know, we often wonder and think about those images and, you know, what my grandfather used to describe, and how it must have been really nice to see this country, even before the Pueblos came here. You know, we often ask people, imagine this country without the pictographs or the petroglyphs. Imagine this country without the pit houses, without the cliff dwellings. Just wild, natural, undisturbed country. That's what was important to us. And when those people passed through here, they left all that. So we had to deal with that for a long time. So we often say, you know, it's it can be a different world.
Do you spend much time alone in nature?
I used to, a lot more. You know, I've had very fortunate opportunities to be in a country that, you know, I'm glad I was able to see. You know, and besides this country here, you know, traveling through it, I've backpacked it, I've hiked it, I've rode horses through it. I was able to see a part of Alaska that has changed now, and I got to see it before it changed. And so it gave me, I guess, a perspective or a taste of a country without trails, without trail signs, and just completely at balance with all the wildlife. And so I often sort of transpose that memory to what it could be here like, or what it was. And so that, you know, to be able to see that stuff, to experience it, you know, I even when I do my pack trips, I often get down and walk. just because I want to be able to feel the breath, I want to be able to feel the ground. Apaches, we weren't full-time horse people, so I welcome that opportunity to get off my horse and give my horse a break and climb. Walk up with a horse and pack horse, pulling them up. Flat country trails. Any chance I get, I'll get off the horse and walk. Not always, but I do as much as I can. And sometimes people ask, "What are you doing?" So I'm working on my high blood pressure. Well, you don't have it. Well, that's why I'm walking. But it's that interest to try to maintain that health. I do appreciate that of my parents, that they instilled that in us to, whenever you can. And growing up, I was fortunate. I must have been in my teens. I met an older gentleman that he told me, whenever you can, do everything. If you're walking, hiking, do it fast. Because it will help you. Move your legs, keep moving, be active. So yeah, it's good to do that, and I think all of that puts you just that much closer to the ground, the earth, your senses. Being able to keep attuned with sounds. That's one of the advantages of being out in the wilderness, is you can hear things so well. Even here, besides the wind right now, I have friends that grew up in different places, and they come here, and I have to ask them to talk quieter because they want to resound. I had one friend from New York that was living here for a while, not here, but in the area, and he'd come to visit, and he grew up in an Italian home that the idea there was you talk over your brothers and sisters, and you talk loud because that's how you get heard. And so he'd come here and visit, and they could hear him a couple of blocks away, and I would have to tell him that the air here is really clean, it's crisp, as clean and crisp as it could be anywhere. So sound travels really easy, really smooth, and you can hear people quite a ways off, even if they're talking normally, you can hear them. So people with a heavy, deep, resounding voice, as his was, carries very far. Becky Campbell is like that. She has a very high, shrill sound. In the wilderness, I heard Becky one time a quarter mile away, because I knew she was about a quarter mile away, and I heard her voice. You could hear it just clear enough that I recognized it. And it was, it's like, that's how clear that sound is. Like up here in the wildlife refuge, the Dragonfly, there's places you can climb up a little higher, and you look out and you see the Three Sisters, and the Three Sisters is the Mexican border. That's almost 100 miles away. But I hear stories from the elders that say that back then that they could see 150 miles at where the earth starts to turn just a bit, but they could see that far because the air was that crisp and that clean. There was no pollution, there was no and it's amazing to think, when we look, we can barely see the Three Sisters, but those guys, they say they could sit up on here, what the locals have called Geronimo Mountain, up here by the mine. They could sit up on those bluffs, and they could literally see into Texas, Arizona, into Mexico. They could see who was coming and going.
I just have a few more, so I'll jump around a little bit. Is there a spiritual significance to these powwows?
It typically and basically universally, most native events, most Indian events are very respectful of that spiritual component. Everything starts with a prayer. Everything involves being grateful for having that opportunity to gather, because it is a big thing. Gatherings were of major importance to most tribes, and so that ability to gather together is seen as very spiritual. There was a reason for those gatherings, and so they are very much related to religion, spirituality, culture, and just being grateful that you're able to see friends, relatives, family, everybody like that. So there's a very much air of thankfulness in those gatherings. And all powwows are different, but it's always the responsibility of the announcer to endear the audience to that culture, to that gathering, to that, bring importance to the people there that put the gathering together. And so it's going to end in prayer. It's going to start in prayer. There's going to be, if there is any giveaways or any portions of the ceremonies that bring attention to that, somebody will speak words of spirituality. That's one of the observances that we have that we've always found curious of the United States, because they've always said, oh, you have to separate religion and politics. And in most native cultures, it's, for lack of a better description, it's holistic, because it includes everything. It includes politics, economics, religion. It includes it all together, but in a balance. That's what, that's the important part of that it's in a balance. So it's strong and it's productive. But we've always found that interesting, that as much as the United States claims to want to separate those powers, in reality, in a lot of communities, they don't. Religion drives politics, politics drives religion, and it's more prevalent than the concept of the country admits. But it's that same thing. We get into these discussions among Indians about politics and what's political, and I registered to vote this last year for the very first time. I never voted. A lot of Indians don't vote. It's just not our political system. But there was a specific person we wanted out, so Indians turned out in droves to vote. And now we're trying to figure out how to get out of it, but we'll see. But it seems that it's always a part of that, and if you have those things in balance, it makes you a stronger community. So yeah, it would be odd to not have any religion in a cultural gathering like a powwow.
Yeah, that's got to be the key right there, is to have it in balance.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, kind of general society that we see nowadays is kind of has all these elements, but to me, they seem extremely out of balance.
Yeah, even for me here, the getting involved with the wolf issue, when they were trying to reintroduce the wolf back into this area. I often went to gatherings where they were going to discuss the wolves, and there's always going to be that element that no wolves, kill them off, we don't want them back, and then the element that it needs, we need biodiversity. And I got asked a couple of times to kind of stand up, well, what do you guys think, as native people coming back to the area, what do you guys think? And the only thing I could ever think about to say that would come out of my mouth was to look down at all these people and say, you guys are all one. It's like a family here. You guys are arguing over something that you either want it all or nothing. And it's, you guys should be, as Americans, it seems like you guys should be working together to solve this. It's not a matter of yes or no. It's any person of intelligence knows that to balance a community, to balance a environment, you need every component that was put there. And here in this area, they need the wolves and they need the grizzly. And unfortunately, that spurs a lot of fear when you start talking grizzlies. But it shouldn't. You know, the stories my grandfather told me of the wolves and the grizzlies he saw here. He says they're not like people imagine. You know, they're not like, you know, when people think of grizzlies, their first thought is Kodiaks, brown bears. You know, I've seen them 11 foot tall. But even in Alaska, when I worked on the Arctic range and the Brooks Range, those grizzlies were small. You know, they're called barren land grizzlies, and they were small. And so it wasn't all grizzlies are huge. They're pretty adaptive to their environment. And what we know of the stories of the grizzlies here is that they were much smaller. They weren't huge. You know, maybe bit bigger than a black bear. But they were not that huge. The carrying capacity of this country just not allowed. But you know, with some of these animal populations being disrupted, it's going to take a lot more commitment to bring these populations back if they're really serious about balancing this country. I mean, that's what would be good, is turn the Gila wilderness into a preserve and add Aldo Leopold to it and have the grizzlies and the wolves here. You know, I think it would be worth the effort, but man, that's playing God. You know, wipe a species out and then try to bring them back. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean, it's so prevalent here. Everything is almost experienced that here. The elk, the sheep, the bear, the wolf, they've all been wiped out, and now they're thinking of, or have brought them back. And it's going to be real difficult. I mean, New Mexico is a killing state. They need to stop that. You know, you can get a license to kill everything here, even exotic species, even people. Sometimes you can get away with it. You know, that needs to stop. That needs to really stop. That's what we would do here in the wilderness. Put all that kind of stuff. You know, let's really let the earth take care of itself, which is the one that knows more than we do.
I think that's a big part of this project, is to kind of look to nature to see what we can learn from it.
Yeah.
To see how we can kind of take these lessons that we find out here and incorporate them into our lives, instead of the other way around where we kind of like impose our will onto it. Do you participate in any other ceremonies similar to the powwow or anything like that? And if you don't want to talk about that stuff, you could just say that too.
No, I don't necessarily have to describe them, but yeah, I mean, one of our big gatherings that we do more often are the sweats, which is an Apache ceremony also. You know, it is a ceremony in a lot of other tribes, in most tribes. But that's one of our more common gatherings, are the sweat lodges. The one coming up here that, you know, luckily for Apache culture, we were able to hang on to the girls' puberty ceremony. And so that one, in some places is public, in some places it's private. But the Mescaleros put on a public girls' puberty ceremony, and that's, you know, people are welcome to go up there and hang out for the ceremony. And that's a real common one that a lot of Apaches attend. The public ones are a little bit different than the private ones. Private ones are typically more traditional. But it's great that ceremony is made public, because it's not very long ago that kind of happened, because for most Apaches, we were not either willing or really given permission or even necessary for us to share a lot of stuff. We were pretty secretive. But we were asked by the elders several years ago that we should talk more, that we should say more, because the disinformation was hurting us. It was actually causing us problems. Like here, you know, if we didn't say anything here, everybody would think that the Pueblos were the only Indians here, and Apaches just passed through. But that there are certain perspectives that allow that, and those are the perspectives that have to change. One example is, why are the pueblos so prized here? Why are they so prevalent? I mean, you see advertising on I-10 for the cliff dwellings. Why is it? Well, different from Apaches, it's stuff that was left behind that you can put a circle around it and put a fence around it and charge people to come and see. You can make money on those cultures. On Apaches, you can't make money. We really don't have anything you can make money on. Us. I can make money on taking you into the wilderness, but you to make money on me, there's nothing on me you can make money on. And so that's the that's the difference. I mean, something like this is different because it's a project, but for me directly, it's different. So the promotion and the importance of the cliff dwellings and that culture that has left something that you can see and charge for is different than for us. I guess to a certain extent, that's what the powwow will allow us to sort of change a little bit. Even though our interest is not to charge at the powwow. We don't want to charge. We used to have to at the university because it was indoors and it was one other way to make the funding. But typically powwows you should not charge to get in. And when we do it out here at Fort Bayard, we're going to stop charging. And it's going to be just open to the public. So yeah.
What is the purpose of these sweats? Spiritual element to it?
Yeah, it's very, very spiritual, and we usually depend on a person that knows how to run a sweat to run them. Most Apaches can run sweats, but it's always more respectful to have somebody that's what they do. That's their expertise. That's their knowledge. Usually, it's holy people that can do that. Medicine people, holy people. There are very specific practices to doing a sweat and things that have to be done. But yeah, and I have a sweat down here, but we haven't used it in a while because we used to go over to Black Range and do a sweats over there. But we'll probably start bringing them back here once we start doing the powwow again. We try to make some of those opportunities available, sweats. Things that people can use to feel better. But yeah, it's pretty important. Some people, that's all they do. We've known people that's all they do every weekend, and that's a lot of work. It's a lot of wood, a lot of stones, preparing the area, inviting people, making sure everybody's doing the right thing, coming in the right way, and learning. Because it's pretty difficult to have people and have to redo this all the time. It's really nice when you have people that have become familiar with it, even non-natives that participate, that they've done it enough that it's easy for them and comfortable. And instead of learning the process, it opens them up to what else is available in those ceremonies. Because a lot of times people you can get caught up in trying to do everything right and not being open to what's there. And so that's why it's so important for us to learn those things. So we do them secondhand and move on to something else, being open.
I don't know if you saw in my email, but we've participated in a few sweats.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Amy's had some kind of powerful experiences in those.
Yeah. If you're there in the right way and open, they can leave an impact.
So how do you think the elders or the other people in the tribe will think about you sharing this stuff with us? Is this what's kind of sensitive, or what do you feel comfortable sharing?
Well, these interviews to us are pretty important because there is a lot of Apaches that are out in the world, and trying to wipe us out, and trying to heap the war of genocide on us. And scatter us out. In reality, what they did was they made more of us, we made more of us, and we just scattered out further. There's been a controversy as to how many Apaches there were, and you hear archaeologists and anthropologists consistently say 8,000. We disagree. We say there was probably more like 20,000 of us. And because of the spreading, taking Apaches to Oklahoma or to Florida, Apaches that went to Mexico, Apaches that went to other reservations, even Apaches that went to World War II. Now there are estimates that there are probably 200,000 of us scattered around now that are descendants. Like I said, there's an embassy in California. There's people over there that have identified themselves as Chiricahuas, but they live in California. Recently, like I mentioned earlier, we now have the Apaches in Mexico that are organized. And so all of a sudden it's like, wow. A few years back we had a gentleman come in from Germany that said his father was an Apache during World War II that happened to meet his mom, and he's the child. And so he came over and he identified himself to a point where I think it was San Carlos, they adopted him. He came with enough history from his dad that there was no question. We hear of Chiricahuas in Boulder. There was a group that came down several years ago and did a little performance there, thinking there were no other Apaches here because they'd been isolated for so long. But we showed up and said, no, there's some of us here now. The guys from California that came back, they came back kind of suspicious. They thought all of us had disappeared because that's what they promote. All Apaches are gone. It's like, no. Geronimo was the last one. No, there was a lot of left behind. Even the ones that hung out in the Black Range way afterwards. Masi, in history they call him Masai, but his name is pronounced Masi, and he lived in the Black Range, had 3 children. He was finally killed by ranchers, but he lived there for a long time. So there were a lot of Apaches trying to stay, trying to hang on. Some were successful, others weren't. Some of us have had to come back. So,
what does the future look like to you?
This headquarters completed, and we can get the ceremonial grounds completed and up and running. We plan to stick around for a long time. We have plans to start bringing in young people to take over some of these roles and responsibilities. A lot of us in this startup have had to do it out of the labor of love, or love of labor, however that's referred to, because we mostly volunteer. But we need to be serious enough about this that we pave a way for the next generation to do it as a career, to be full-time administrators for this tribe, full-time media cover, full-time, positions that pay and allow them to work and, hopefully flourish. What we used to do here. We didn't just survive out in the wilderness. We flourished. We were a thriving culture. There was nothing we had want of. Medicines, ceremonies, songs, social, everything was, again, in balance.
Do you think you can get back to that point where people are kind of living in balance with nature again, or are you looking to kind of merge with modern society?
For me, the wish would be to hopefully live in balance again. What the reality is I don't know. There are so many things that can be threats, can be risks that are going to change. Some, hopefully, we can stop them. Some, I don't know if we can. But there's big things that are coming that I don't know if people are aware of them. The Zia line. The reason we have these huge wind turbines in the Black Range, those acres and acres of solar panels. I mean, yeah, it's green energy, but it's ruined the whole region, And now with the Zia line coming from Alamogordo or somewhere further east in New Mexico, that's going to be a huge modern transmission line coming all the way. They even sacrificed a portion of White Sands National Monument for it. And it's going to come down from Alamogordo all the way through across that San Andreas range there. Clips a portion of White Sands, goes over the San Andreas, goes to Las Cruces, and then follows I-10 all the way to Phoenix, because Phoenix and Tucson need more electricity. And they're putting all these power stations like they did that, and they're probably going to build more to feed that line that's going that way. And anytime I see people that are going to go from Silver City to Albuquerque or to Las Cruces, I usually recommend enjoy that view. It's open, wild country. There's an old transmission line, but it's old and it's real low. Enjoy that country while it's open. There's places in that country that are still nicely open. But, the image for me for that is one of the stories of Apaches stealing horses in Mesilla and riding up that country. And so you can imagine them riding through that country with no transmission lines, no road, no highway, just, open. To the point now where we are looking at possibly these huge mega transmission lines, those big, huge steel ones. It's just going to go right down all the way to Tucson and Phoenix. It's like, again, we are a sacrifice country. We are being sacrificed by what they're putting in this country to serve the needs in other places. And that's always been difficult, because that's not how we see this country. That's not how we look at this country. It's not a sacrifice state, not a sacrifice country, and it's happening more and more. I mean, luckily the mines slowed down, but we have 4 new mines in the area, 4 new copper mines, and it's like Morenci, Clifton, Tyrone, Santa Rita, they're not enough. So now we're going to get Oak Flat, we're going to get Copper Flat, we're going to get the one over here on Texas Canyon, on I-10 going toward Tucson. Amazing, that there's that hunger. Let's get it out, let's send it somewhere else. But we're back to fight again. So, hopefully more people will join us this time, because that was the good thing to see at one of the jet flyover protests. Was just the amount of people that showed up and were passionate about stopping it. People are finally seeing the value of this country, and it's easy to see why there's no reservations here. It's all national forest. That's because the government is holding on to it. Coronado, Gila, Cibola, Apache, all national forests, and they're hanging on to it. There's a reason for it. It's a pretty valuable country, and we took care of it for a long time. Protected it, kept it balanced. But the value of it can't be missed. It's valuable in so many ways, and right now the value is the fight between the mineral and the aesthetic, the water and populations. So all these natural elements, water, fire, they're fighting with this effort to change them. Even fire is being changed. The way the Forest Service is dealing with fire is totally wrong. And so even that element is being fought. Water, it's for whatever reason America seems to want to need to fight these elements when they should be harnessing them.
You kind of said what I was just thinking a little bit earlier, is that I think most of this comes down to values. It's just totally different sets of values on either side.
Yeah.
And it seems like the fight that needs to be had is,
Yeah.
or on that front at least, how do you change these values?
Well, the changing of the values that, for us, the value of, which has been an interesting concept, what they, even though the reference and the concept of it is foreign because it's about tribes further to the east, but it's this concept of 7 generations. And there was always this thought that, they're talking about distance and time, but in understanding the concept a little bit better, it really relates to 7 generations with you in the center. So it's 3 generations behind you and 3 generations ahead of you. And so that tends to want to make you be a different type of responsibility for those 3 generations in front and behind you. The care, the respect, and the knowledge that those 3 bring to you and what you're going to give to the next 3 is a better way to explain that 7 generation concept of what are we going to leave for us, for the kids. And I remember from a young age seeing those posters of Smokey Bear, and seeing, okay, well, green forest and a black forest, and the concept of that's not what you want. And it's like, well, as I've learned and have been taught, that every inch of the Gila is in some stage of fire, whether it's recovered or freshly burned or in the process of recovering. Every inch of that country is burned. I mean, so the change of those has always been I guess, a dream that somewhere they'll find it. We had seen it for a little bit when we had the forest supervisor that was probably the first woman that ever came to the Forest Service there as a supervisor. She came in with a different idea, and she came in to say no more fighting fires in the wilderness, just monitor them. And the chaos and the crying that produced in the macho industry of firefighting, it was amazing to see. I fought fire with the Forest Service, with the state in New Mexico, and with volunteers. So I've seen how they operate. I've seen what their importance and their priorities are. And to see this woman come in and put a stop to firefighting in the wilderness was amazing, but the reaction was also educational, because you saw the different side of that need to fight fire, which I knew it existed, but I could never pinpoint it. But there's that certain amount of macho-ness that goes with firefighting, and so there was a lot of hurt egos when that came up. But it was like, oh, finally somebody's seeing it different. Finally somebody's using their PhD and their masters, they're using it, because everywhere else we see, they're not using them, or they're being taught wrong or something, because for all the problems that are being caused, and all these people that claim to be PhDs and GS9s and GS10s, and they still don't get it. It's baffling. That's why we've stated, give us back the wilderness. We'll manage it. We'll take care of it. Get it back to where it used to be. More like a home, where it's safe and productive and teaches you. Not a place where you got to enter and then come out. The perspective is totally different with the hunting. Last year before, it's hard to tell now with COVID where we are and where we've been. But I was coming out of the wilderness, and I had a group with me. My groups are always small. But I had a group with me, and we had caught up to these backpackers that were obviously hunters. And typically, I ride in the back. I don't lead the rides. So either I have a wrangler, or sometimes I work with my clients to lead, so they can see the country firsthand, not see the back of me all the time. And so I work with the clients to have them ride up in front. But this particular time, I had a client and one of my girlfriend that was working with me riding in front, and I didn't hear it, but I was told later, and I wish I could have heard it because we could have responded different. But apparently, as the client and the wrangler were riding up, the hunter saw me in the back walking, pulling the pack horse, and thought that what they had seen was an elk carcass on the back of the pack horse that I was walking with. And so the hunter said, "Oh great, you guys got an elk." And my girlfriend said, "No, we're not hunting." And the guy just pops up and says, "I don't know why the hell anybody would want to be in this country other than hunting." And that was his perspective, was that country was nothing good but for killing some large bull. And that's pretty sad. That's all he saw the Gila as, you know. It's like, well, maybe you shouldn't be here, you know, maybe you shouldn't come in here. And if we didn't have hunting in that wilderness, he wouldn't be there. You know, that voice, that assault that came out into the air wouldn't be there. You know, it'd be good things. People saying, "Oh, nice to be here, good to see this." You know, "Oh, look at that animal," that kind of stuff. Instead of, "Why the hell would anybody want to be here?" Then to savagely kill something and carry it home so people see you killed it. It's like, no.
I'm out of questions. Got any? Or you, Andrea, if you have any.
No.
You were thinking of.
Just thank you for, allowing us to be part of this project. I envy you guys, for having the ability and the time and energy to do this. This is great, So we're out there with you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We're trying to do it the right way, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, I've always thought of, I go back and forth a lot in the wilderness. People go out there to not be bothered, kind of be left alone, but there for a while, things were happening so bad out there that I just started stopping people and apologizing to them for bothering them, but I would have to say things, There's no Forest Service out here. We're the ones that got to pick up the trash. We're the ones that have to clean this, clean that, One of the constant things I see in the wilderness now, which I'm not being a good example of right now, but it's aluminum foil in the fire pits. I hope you guys, you might see that. So many fire pits are just filled with aluminum foil, and they're left there. That's like, didn't you listen in science class? This stuff don't disappear.
I don't know if people think that it disappears.
That's what it's got to be. Hunters are starting to carry chainsaws in the wilderness. That's because the Forest Service hardly goes in there. When I worked as a meat packer for the Campbells, I was out of work and I needed quick work, and they were hiring meat packers, and I told them, "I'll work for you guys for 2 months, but I'll only pack out elk and deer. I won't pack anything else out." I got to be in one of the camps when Fish and Game and Forest Service showed up to inspect the camps. And in the middle of the day when most of the hunters are sleeping. So that's a faux pas right there. But they were showing up, and I expected to hear them asking questions like, "How many elk did you see? Did you shoot one? How many bulls? What did you see?" And to my dismay, they were showing up to the camps and asking questions to the hunters like, "Are you being treated right? Are you being given what you were promised? Has the outfitter done everything properly in camp? Nothing about the animals, nothing that you shoot one and it got away, that you put an arrow in one and it got away. Nothing of dealing with the animals. And, that's part of that formation. And, well, New Mexico is a killing state. If you pay the license, that's all they're worried about, the money. And then maybe we'll do something someday. But what's happened with the elk here, it's different now. You do understand the elk have been reintroduced into the area because of the mentality of the Forest Service, which was, multi-use at that time. Everybody, you can mine, you can hunt, you can cattle, you can blah, 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 everything, and, enjoy the outdoors. But when they realized that there were no more elk and the state needed to make money, they decided, as a lot of other things, was to import it back in. So they brought in elk from Oregon. And the only way to get these elk to scatter back out by training them was to put a system of cisterns all throughout the wilderness. And I know where there's several of them that I've come across, but every single one of them is dysfunctional. It doesn't work. It's leaked or it's broken, the systems are broken. So all of these cisterns are failing. The one that I do know works, it's because the Campbells went in there and fixed it because they hunt there. So they need to have the animals close by, and the cisterns are the easiest ones to accommodate that. So I started to see hunters salting the cisterns, putting salt by the cisterns. And so there for a while, Gila had the reputation of, oh, that's great elk hunting, you get big bulls and all this hunting thing. Well, now it's slowly kind of disappearing because you're hardly seeing elk in that southern part of the wilderness. They're starting to move north because the cisterns are failing. Even the Campbells asked me last time I was up there, they asked me, have you seen any elk, Joe? I said, no. A couple of years now, sometimes we'll go without seeing one elk, even if we're out there for 5, 6, 7, 10 days. Took the National Geographic group out last year. 10 days out there. Not one elk. Not one deer. Not one coyote. It's like they're all moving north. And you hear up further north, oh, there's a bunch of elk. Snow Lake, they're full of elk up there. And it's like, well, there's more water.
Yeah. There's
more water, less people. I mean, here the elk we had here in the reserve, the Forest Service scattered them. Because they didn't want to pay for their horse feed, so they turned most of their horses into most of the refuge. And that drove all the elk out. Within 1 year, they were gone. We hardly see them.
wow.
And it's just because of their greed. I thought it was a wildlife refuge, not a grazing, not a grazing pasture. But it's, they don't want to listen. They don't want to listen. The lady that runs part of the recreation and the Gila National Forest right now, she's completely against people in the wilderness. She's flat out told us there shouldn't be any people in the Gila wilderness. All those trails should not be there. That place should just be locked up. It's like, whoa.
Is her reasoning just so the
She hates people. No, she just hates people.
Oh,
It had nothing to do with natural. It had nothing to do with anything. It had nothing to do with balance. Because I've dealt with her several times, and it's all about her own perspective and her own concern of work. The less she has to deal with, because that's part of her job, is dealing with people of the wilderness.
so people make her job difficult.
Yeah. I mean, she was not going to let National Geographic go in. She literally stopped one of my horseback rides to support the Gila River Coalition. I was doing horseback rides and giving the money to them. Forest Service was going to put a stop to that. Because the Gila River does not have a wilderness permit, even though I was doing the trips. But they advertised it, so no, you can't do that. We're going to stop it. Last year they stopped. They waited till a week before the trip to make a fuss. 2 years ago they waited 3 weeks before, so we were able to salvage it, change it. This last year they waited 1 week. said, "You can't do that." But I thought we talked last year. I thought we arranged all that. No, we didn't. Sorry, you can't do that. And they totally ruined it. So, I mean, it's amazing that the Forest Service works against these projects. The flyover, they didn't raise a single finger. Flyover, it was all community. Forest Service just administered the seminars and the discussions. They tried to sell it to us, but they didn't try to stop it. It's scary. So every time you run into a forest ranger, ask them questions.
Okay. I have different experiences with forest rangers. Some of them are really friendly and seem like they want to help, and some of them are kind of seem like they're on some sort of power trip.
Yeah.
And they just want to control everything.
Yeah, like for me, the reason we're outfitters and the reason we have to report our trips is because that gives them the opportunity to take money from us. Plus, it sets up the what do they call it? The justification to come and see you what you're doing in the wilderness.
Okay.
And I've heard that's what most outfitters do is they go to one spot, they camp there, and then they do rides out of there because they set up tents. And for me, I don't do that. I move around every day. I don't set up tents. I'm very light to cook on fires, and so we move every day. And come to find out, I never saw a Forest Service come to one of my camps. And find out is because I moved around so much they could never catch me until 11 years had passed since I first got my permit. 11 years, and I was at White Creek, and I had a group with me. And I often tell people, just because of who I am and what I've dealt with and been involved in, is I ask people not to yell my name in public. Don't yell out at me in public. Call my name out in public because you never know. But anyway, we were setting up camp, and we'd just gotten there late afternoon. Ever since setting up camp, there's one of the clients over there by the horses, and here come two forest rangers, dressed in their uniforms and carrying rifles. And they pull up, and they ask the woman, that first lady that was there, they asked her, "Well, are you guys hunting?" And the lady turns around and says, "No, we're with Joe." And I heard her, and I just kind of bit my head, because I knew exactly what was going to happen. And I look up and I see that forest ranger's eyes get really big. And then he didn't say anything. And then they just rode on to White Creek. We were kind of half a mile away from White Creek, but I knew exactly what they're going to do. And sure enough, the next morning, while we're eating breakfast, they pull up. "We're here from the Gila National Forest, and I'm here to inspect your camp." And he looks at me, and he takes one step like he's going to walk into the camp, and he stops, and he looks around. And he goes, "You don't have nothing." So he turns around and starts to leave. And I stop him and say, "It's my turn. Let me talk to you. Come here. See what you guys are doing." And, so they've always kind of had this reserve about me. They can't seem to put their finger on me. I don't hunt, so they don't have that control on me.
Okay.
I move around, and I don't leave sign. I make sure my horse manure is scattered. I make sure I pick everything up. If I make a fire pit, I destroy it. It's over the ground. Make sure I don't leave a sign. But you can always tell my fire pits in the wilderness. They're oval. They're not round. So if you see, because I make a fire on one end and cook on the other.
Okay, yeah.
And so you can always... I can tell when somebody's been to my fire pit because they change them. They make it round. So if you see oval fire pits, use them right.
Yeah.
Make a fire and cook. Heat your water.
I haven't made a fire yet. Probably won't very often.
It's tough right now with this wind. And
yeah,
no, it's real tricky. But there's some nice camps out there. I'm sure you guys will have fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this section coming up.
Where are you starting at?
Her house.
Walnut?
Basically, a walk from there to
Yeah.
Doc Campbell's.
They started at the
Down-
terminus down
down the
border,
Yeah.
and then I picked them up on the first highway 9 crossing.
And so you'll follow the Condel Divide to Signal Peak?
Are you talking about the ending?
No, to from here, just even from Silver City. So if you get on Little Walnut, you'll go kind of behind Silver City
Behind the picnic ground up there.
picnic grounds, and then you're headed toward Signal Peak and Twin Sisters. Is that the route you're taking, or are you going down the road? Because
I'm not even
people
sure.
take two routes.
Yeah.
Some go down the road, some go over Signal Peak. But that's a ways without water.
So there's the official CDT route, which goes like way farther east, and we're going to be kind of following the middle fork of the Gila River.
Yeah, so you'll probably drop down toward, once you get over on that side, you'll probably drop down toward Sheep Corral.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the names of the
Around
places
Sheep
are.
Corral, you drop down into the main Gila, and then follow the main Gila all the way up, and then catch the middle fork.
Yeah, see, I don't know how they get from Little
You can check it out
Walnut.
if you want. It's,
Yeah.
We're going to follow that pink route.
From Little Walnut Trailhead. I don't know
Yeah.
how
Well-
they go up and over.
There's it'll probably be one of the trails that goes up and over what do they call that little Toad Ridge, Little Toad Ridge. What's it called? But it's a ridge that goes over, and then immediately you drop right down to the Gila River. Then you follow the Gila River, and then you got water all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard, that portion there was starting to get bad because of the cows.
Recent water.
Oh yeah, no, the feral cows were way down toward. They were mostly toward Turkey Creek, but in the last few years they've made it all the way up to the Sapio. So the last time that I was in the Sapio 2 years ago, I dropped into the Sapio, and it smelled like a cattle ranch.
Yeah.
There was cows and shit everywhere, and even the smell of the air was like a stockyard. And so I've been complaining to the Forest Service and, suggesting, because they hire and pay a lot of money for cowboys to go in there and try to pull them out, but they never get many. And so we've been telling them, why don't you shoot them? And I heard here recently that that's what they're going to end up doing. They're going to go in with helicopters.
Oh,
And it's like, why don't you guys contract with the state game and fish, sell licenses, and have hunters kill them?
Right.
Why
Take
fly
away and-
why fly helicopters into a wilderness? It's like you got all these hungry hunters waiting to kill something. There's big bulls out there. Big cows.
Those cats and bulls.
Deformed little midget cows. There's all kinds of stuff. They could have fun out there killing cattle.
Okay with the truck?
Yes.
So well, thank you guys. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Spread the word.
Uh-huh.
Spread the word.
If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, where you'll find a lot of videos that have similar themes.